It's funny, you know? My wife, Chloe, stood there in the middle of our backyard in Austin, Texas, glowing. Tears streaming down her face as she told 40 people, our friends and family, that we were having a baby. And I just smiled. Like I didn't already know the child wasn't mine. How did I get to that moment, standing there, watching my entire marriage collapse in slow motion while everyone else cheered? My job, industrial safety inspector, means I spend my days identifying risks before they become disasters. Calculating failure points. Looking at systems that seem perfectly stable from the outside and seeing the cracks. And right then, I was watching my life crack. Chloe had this undeniable glow about her that everyone kept commenting on. Her sister, Sophia, kept hugging her, openly weeping with joy. And I stood there, my arm around Chloe's waist, while my mind replayed the audio recording on my phone. The one that proved, definitively, she'd been sleeping with her boss for 7 months. The thing about discovering betrayal, real betrayal, is that you get this tiny, razor-thin window of choice in those first few seconds. You can either detonate everything immediately, in a blaze of shock and anger. Or you can go cold. You can go methodical. I've always been the kind of person who documents everything before making a move. So, that Saturday afternoon, in late September, with decorative balloons tied to our fence and a cake that read, "Baby makes 3, in blue frosting, I played the part. I had known for exactly 11 days that she was carrying someone else's child, and was planning to put my name on the birth certificate. It started the way these things always start, I guess. With something small that just didn't quite fit. I came home early from a job site in Round Rock one mid-August afternoon because a concrete pour got delayed. Chloe's laptop was open on the kitchen counter, still logged into her email. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally. I was just walking past, heading for the fridge, and saw a message preview. It said, "Last night was incredible," from someone named Mark. My brain did this weird, automatic thing where it tried to make it innocent for about 5 seconds. Maybe it was a coworker, a friend, congratulating her on a project. But then reality crashed in. It wasn't innocent. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let my expression change when she came downstairs 20 minutes later, asking about dinner. I just filed it away. And then I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring for months. She'd been staying late at work twice a week since March. She'd changed her phone password in April. She'd started going to meet a personal trainer at weird hours and coming back without looking like she'd actually worked out. And I'd explained away every single one of those things because I wanted to believe my wife wasn't the kind of person who'd do this to me. I spent that first week just watching her, noting the patterns. And she had no idea that I was running a completely different calculation than the one she thought we were both working from. On the 4th day, I pulled her phone records through our shared account. Hundreds of texts to a number that wasn't saved in her contacts, going all the way back to February. She'd kept it unsaved, probably thinking that if I ever glanced at her phone, a random number would look less suspicious than a saved name. But that kind of operational security only works if your husband isn't the type to cross-reference timestamps with his own calendar. Every single time she told me she was working late, or meeting Sophia for drinks, or going to visit her mom, she'd sent or received messages from that number within the same hour. Mark turned out to be Mark Hammond, her direct supervisor at the marketing firm where she'd worked for 3 years. Married, with 2 kids, according to his LinkedIn profile. Apparently comfortable enough with the affair to use his personal cell phone for it. I created a hidden folder on my personal laptop. Started saving screenshots with metadata timestamps. I built a timeline that showed exactly when this thing had started and how it had escalated. The messages from March were cautious, flirty. By April, they were explicit about meeting at hotels. By June, she was telling him she loved him. By July, they were talking about how they wished they could be together openly, if only their situations were different. I recovered deleted messages using a backup program I'd quietly installed on our home computer, the one she synced her phone to every night. And that's where I found the real damage. She told him in early August that she was pregnant. And they had this whole conversation about whether it was his or mine based on timing. She literally said the chances were about 70-30 in his favor, meaning Mark's, but it doesn't matter because Caleb will never question it. There were messages about how I was stable and reliable and would be a good father. About how she couldn't leave me right now because I made twice what Mark did, and her lifestyle would take a hit. About how maybe, in a few years, when his kids were older, they could figure something out. But for now, this was the practical choice. I read those messages sitting in my truck outside a job site during my lunch break. And I remember feeling this cold clarity settle over me. Like I was reading an incident report about someone else's life. She'd calculated the whole thing, run the numbers on keeping me versus leaving me, and decided that I was the better financial option, even if Mark was the one she actually wanted. We'd signed a postnuptial agreement 2 years earlier, when I inherited money from my grandfather. Something she'd agreed to easily at the time, saying she'd never want my family's money anyway. And now I understood that agreement was going to be the thing that protected me from losing everything. The pregnancy announcement came 3 weeks after I found the first message. By then, I'd already met with a lawyer named Mr. Henderson, who specialized in cases involving paternity fraud. He told me that audio recordings were legal in our state, as long as one party consented. Which meant anything I recorded in my own vehicle or home was admissible. And that if I could prove she deliberately misrepresented paternity, I'd have a strong position in divorce proceedings. Chloe sometimes borrowed my truck when her car was getting serviced, or when she needed to haul something. And I knew her car was scheduled for an oil change. That Tuesday night, I installed a voice-activated recording app on an old smartphone, charged it fully, wrapped it in black electrical tape, and wedged it under the passenger seat of my truck. She took my truck Wednesday morning, just like I knew she would. And I got exactly what I needed that afternoon when she called Mark during her lunch break. They talked for 11 minutes. He'd asked if she was sure about going through with it. And she'd said, "It's his. I'll put my husband's name on everything. And honestly, Mark, this is better for everyone because Caleb will never leave once there's a kid involved." She talked about me like I was a safety net she was actively exploiting. Like my commitment to her was just another resource to be managed. I listened to that recording 3 times after I retrieved the phone that evening, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding anything. Then I saved it to 4 different cloud services and sent a copy to Mr. Henderson. I went to the backyard party knowing exactly what I was going to do. Just not when. Because timing matters when you're planning to detonate someone's entire life. Chloe kept touching her stomach and smiling at me like we were sharing this beautiful secret. Her parents kept talking about grandchildren and how proud they were. I played the role of excited father-to-be while mentally reviewing every piece of evidence I'd collected. I had screenshots organized by date. Phone records highlighted and annotated. Hotel receipts I'd pulled from her credit card statements. And I had that audio recording that proved she knew the baby probably wasn't mine and had decided to trap me anyway. I called Mr. Henderson from my truck on the way home from the party and told him I was ready to move forward. He said he'd have the divorce papers ready to file by Monday morning, and that the evidence package I'd built was one of the most thorough he'd seen in 20 years of family law. She wanted to announce at the backyard party. She wanted everyone to see us as this perfect couple starting a family. And I let her have that moment. Because I knew it would make what came next hit even harder. She thought she was trapping me with a pregnancy that would lock me into 18 years of supporting another man's child. But she had no idea that I'd spent the last 3 weeks building a case that would expose exactly what kind of person she really was. 3 weeks later, the second backyard party happened. Chloe had no idea it would be the last time most of these people would ever speak to her again. She wanted to do a gender reveal this time, because apparently one public celebration wasn't enough. She'd spent days planning this elaborate setup with colored smoke bombs and a photographer she'd hired to capture everyone's reactions. I told her it was a great idea and even helped her arrange the tables. The whole time, I was running through my plan like I was conducting a final safety inspection before a controlled demolition. Mr. Henderson had filed the divorce papers that morning, but they wouldn't be served until Monday. That gave me exactly one weekend to make sure everyone who mattered knew the truth before Chloe could spin her own version of events. I'd loaded the audio recording onto a Bluetooth speaker I'd hidden in the garage. I'd printed copies of the most damning text messages and stored them in a folder inside my truck. And I'd rehearsed exactly what I was going to say until it felt like reading a technical report instead of destroying my marriage in front of 40 witnesses. She wore this white sundress that showed off her small bump. Kept saying how grateful she was that everyone could make it on such short notice. Her mom kept fussing over her like she was made of glass, while her dad talked to me about setting up a college fund. Mark wasn't there, because Chloe had specifically told me she didn't want work people at family events. Which was darkly funny, considering she'd been sleeping with her work person for almost 8 months at that point. My friend, Ben, showed up early and caught my eye from across the yard. I'd told him 2 days earlier what was about to happen, because I needed at least one person there who wouldn't think I'd lost my mind. One of Chloe's coworkers, Jake, had also shown up with his girlfriend. I made a mental note that he was going to witness this entire thing and take it back to the office, which was exactly what I wanted. Sophia was running around with her camera, taking candid shots. Chloe's parents were holding court near the food table. And I stood next to my wife, my hand on her lower back, thinking about how she'd told Mark that I was too stable to ever suspect anything. The gender reveal was scheduled for 4 o'clock, when everyone had arrived and the lighting would be perfect for photos. Chloe kept checking her phone for confirmation from the photographer. An hour earlier, I'd sent her a text from a burner app number, pretending to be the photographer, saying I was running late due to an accident on the highway. She kept refreshing her messages, waiting for an update that would never come. She started getting anxious around 3:45, asking if we should wait, or just go ahead without professional photos. I told her we should just use Sophia's camera, because these moments were about family anyway. She bought it completely. Everyone gathered in a semicircle around the spot where we were supposed to set off the smoke bombs. Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement as she explained that we'd both pull the tabs at the same time and find out together what we were having. I was standing there, holding a blue smoke bomb that I had no intention of ever setting off, watching her smile at me like I was about to share the happiest moment of her life. All I could think about was that audio clip where she called me a sure thing who'd never leave once there was a kid involved. I let her finish her little speech about how this baby was a blessing and how excited we both were. Waited for the applause to die down. And then I said I had something I wanted to add before we did the reveal. The shift in tone was immediate. Everyone could tell from my voice that something was off. Chloe's smile got confused and tight around the edges as she looked at me, trying to figure out what I was doing. I said that before we celebrated this pregnancy, I thought everyone should know that my wife had been having an affair with her boss, Mark Hammond, since February. And that the baby she was carrying had a 70% chance of being his, based on her own admission in text messages. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the neighbor's wind chimes 3 houses down. Chloe's face went through this rapid progression of shock to panic to anger, that would have been fascinating if it wasn't happening to someone I'd once loved. She started saying, "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" But I was already walking toward the garage. I could hear people murmuring behind me as I grabbed the Bluetooth speaker and connected my phone. The audio recording played for everyone standing in that backyard. Chloe's voice coming through crystal clear as she told Mark that the baby was his. But she'd put my name on everything because I'd never leave once there was a kid involved. And Mark really needed to stop worrying because she had it all figured out. I watched her face go white as her own words echoed across the yard. Watched her parents' expressions collapse into confusion and horror. Watched Sophia's camera drop to her side as she stared at her sister like she was seeing a stranger. Chloe tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back and let the recording keep playing through the part where she talked about how I made good money and she wasn't about to give up the lifestyle for some romantic fantasy with a married man. Her mom made this wounded sound in the back of her throat. Her dad's face went completely blank. And I saw several people, including Jake, pull out their own phones to record what was happening, because it was too surreal to just be witnessed. Jake was already typing something on his phone, probably texting other people from their office. And I knew by Monday morning, everyone at that marketing firm would know exactly what Chloe and Mark had done. I turned off the speaker when the recording ended and said that I'd filed for divorce that morning, that paternity testing would be part of the legal proceedings, and that I wanted everyone here to know the truth before Chloe had a chance to rewrite history. She was crying, trying to say something about how it wasn't what it sounded like, how I was taking things out of context. But her own voice had just played for everyone, telling Mark that she was deliberately trapping me with a baby that probably wasn't mine. Sophia was backing away from her sister like she was physically repulsed. Their mom was crying into their dad's shoulder. And I could see people near the back already heading for their cars, because they wanted no part of whatever was happening. Ben caught my eye and gave me this tiny nod. I picked up my keys from the patio table, where I'd left them specifically for this moment. I told Chloe that her stuff would be packed and ready for pickup by Tuesday, that all communication from this point forward needed to go through my lawyer, and that she should probably call Mark and let him know his wife would be getting some interesting information in the next 24 hours. The last thing I saw as I walked out of that backyard was Chloe standing alone in her white sundress, the unlit smoke bomb still in her hand, surrounded by people who were either staring at her or deliberately not looking at her. And I felt nothing except this cold satisfaction that she'd gotten exactly the public spectacle she'd wanted, just not the kind she'd planned for. I heard her calling my name as I got in my truck, but I didn't turn around. Didn't give her the confrontation she was probably desperate for. I drove to Ben's apartment, where I'd already moved half my important belongings earlier that week. She'd wanted everyone to see us as the perfect couple, expanding our perfect family. She'd orchestrated this whole performance about love and commitment, and I'd let her have her stage right up until the moment I used it to show everyone exactly who she really was. I spent that first night at Ben's apartment staring at my phone, watching the messages pile up. 53 calls from Chloe. 22 from her mother. 16 text messages that started with apologies and ended with accusations. I deleted every single one without reading past the first line. Ben ordered pizza and didn't ask me how I was feeling, because he already knew. We sat there, watching basketball highlights, while my wife's entire life collapsed in real time across Austin. I'd blocked Chloe's number by midnight because the voicemails were getting increasingly desperate. Things about how we could work through this, and how the baby changed everything, and how I was being cruel by not even giving her a chance to explain. The thing she didn't understand was that I'd already given her dozens of chances over the 7 months she'd been sleeping with Mark. Every single night, she'd come home and kissed me, and let me believe we were building something real. And I didn't owe her anything now, except the legal minimum. Monday morning, I sent an email to Mark's wife, Sarah, using the contact information I'd found on her public Facebook profile. I kept it simple and factual, like I was filing an incident report. I attached screenshots of the messages between Mark and Chloe with timestamps. I included the audio recording. And I wrote exactly 3 sentences explaining that her husband had been having an affair with my wife since February, and that I thought she deserved to know before making any decisions about her own marriage. She responded 6 hours later with just 2 words, "Thank you." I found out later from Ben, who knew someone in their neighborhood, that she'd called a locksmith before Mark even got home from work that day. Mark tried calling me twice that week, and I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were this bizarre mix of anger and pleading, where he blamed me for ruining his family while also trying to convince me that the affair hadn't meant anything serious. I saved those voicemails and forwarded them to Mr. Henderson, because they were essentially admissions of the affair. Watching Mark scramble to control damage he'd caused himself was the closest thing to entertainment I had during those first few days. The HR investigation at Chloe's company started on Wednesday after Jake submitted a formal complaint about a supervisor having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. He'd apparently included video footage from the gender reveal party, showing the audio recording playing for everyone. Both Chloe and Mark were put on immediate administrative leave pending the investigation, which meant they were both home without pay while HR went through their work emails and found exactly what I knew they'd find. Company policy was clear about relationships between supervisors and direct reports. And the fact that they'd been using company resources to coordinate their affair made it even worse from a liability standpoint. They were both officially terminated on Friday afternoon. I only know the timeline because Chloe sent me a long email about how I destroyed her career and her reputation over a mistake she'd made when she was confused and vulnerable, completely ignoring the fact that she'd spent 7 months deliberately deceiving me while planning to commit paternity fraud. I met with Mr. Henderson every few days to go over the divorce proceedings. Everything was moving faster than typical because Chloe's lawyer knew they had no leverage and was advising her to settle quickly. The paternity test was scheduled for after the baby was born. But we'd already established grounds for divorce based on adultery with documented evidence. And that postnuptial agreement I'd mentioned was about to do exactly what it was designed to do. She was asking for the house and spousal support and half of everything. But Mr. Henderson had put together a case showing that she committed fraud by concealing the affair and deliberately misleading me about paternity. We offered her a settlement that gave her $20,000 in her car in exchange for a clean break with no spousal support and no claim to the house or my inheritance. Her lawyer convinced her to take it after explaining that going to trial would cost more than she'd ever recover and would involve all the evidence becoming public record in court documents that anyone could access. The divorce was finalized in early December, 11 weeks after the backyard party. The entire hearing lasted less than 10 minutes, because everything had been settled in advance. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. Not happy, exactly, but free from the constant weight of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Chloe tried to approach me in the parking lot, but I kept walking. I heard her yelling something about how I'd never know if I'd thrown away my own child, but I didn't turn around. Because I already knew the answer didn't matter anymore. The baby was born in March. I got a letter from her lawyer requesting paternity testing. But I filed a motion to dismiss based on the settlement agreement she'd signed that explicitly waived any right to establish paternity as part of the divorce terms. The judge agreed without even scheduling a hearing. I ran into Sophia at a coffee shop in April. She apologized for not reaching out sooner. Said she'd been processing everything and trying to figure out what she could have missed in her sister. She told me Chloe was living with their parents and working retail because nobody in marketing would hire her after word got around about why she'd been fired. And that Mark had moved to Arizona after his own divorce went through. I thanked her for the information, but I didn't ask for details because I'd already moved on in every way that mattered. I could tell she was looking for some kind of closure or forgiveness that I wasn't equipped to give her. I'd started seeing someone new named Emily, who worked in the scheduling department at one of my regular job sites. She knew the basics of what had happened, but didn't treat me like I was damaged or needed fixing. We'd been dating for 6 weeks, and it felt easy in a way that my marriage never had. No constant calculations or second-guessing, just 2 people who enjoyed each other's company without the weight of betrayal hanging over everything. The Reddit post I eventually wrote wasn't about revenge or triumph or getting even. It was just about documenting what happens when someone tries to trap you and you refuse to be trapped. People in the comments kept calling me cold or calculating, asking how I'd managed to stay calm through all of it. And the truth was that staying calm was the only thing that kept me from falling apart completely. I'd loved Chloe enough to marry her and plan a future with her. Finding out she'd been using that love as leverage to secure her lifestyle had broken something fundamental in how I understood relationships. But I wasn't going to let her take anything else from me. Not my house, or my money, or my sense of self. Playing it cold and methodical was the only way I knew how to survive losing someone I'd thought I'd spend my life with. I'm not the guy who got cheated on anymore. I'm just me, and that's enough. So, here's what I want to know. Was I wrong to expose her publicly instead of handling it privately? Or does planning paternity fraud forfeit your right to a quiet divorce?